They say you can measure a man's life by the quiet moments, the silences between the noise. If that's true, then mine had become unnaturally quiet. My name is Edward Langston. I was 74 years old when my world began to collapse. Not suddenly, but like a roof weakening under snow, bit by bit. No crashes, just creaks. I had lived alone since my wife Martha passed away 8 years ago. Our only son, Ryan, visited occasionally, mostly when he needed help with a mortgage or his car payment. I never minded. That's what parents are for, right? We weren't close anymore. Not since he married Vanessa. She was cold, polite in a rehearsed way. There was always something calculated behind her smile. But Ryan loved her, and I loved my son. So I stayed silent. 3 years ago, a woman named Helen Archer entered my life. She was in her 40s, had worked in hospice care for years, and moved into my guest house to help out around the home. What started as basic support turned into companionship. She cooked, cleaned, reminded me to take my vitamins. But more than that, she talked to me like I mattered. She was a single mother. Her 10-year-old son Elliot was shy and bright, always reading books about space and science. His father had abandoned them before he was born. They didn't have much, just each other. I trusted Helen, and she never gave me a reason not to. The first time it happened, I thought I was just tired. I was walking down the garden path when my right leg buckled underneath me. I fell hard onto the gravel. When I tried to speak, my tongue felt thick. Slurred words, like I'd had a stroke. Helen found me minutes later. Her hands were trembling as she helped me to my feet. "Edward, my God, are you okay? Should I call an ambulance?" "No," I managed. "Just tired, that's all." The next morning, I was fine. I chalked it up to age, but then it happened again, and again. My balance wavered. I was having trouble writing. My speech occasionally slurred during long conversations. Helen began to panic, but Ryan, he just nodded, almost smug. "It was bound to happen eventually, Dad. You're not getting younger. Might be time to talk about long-term care." That was the first time I saw a glimpse of something behind his voice. Not concern, anticipation. Ryan scheduled a neurology appointment for me. "Just in case, he said. The doctor barely asked questions before delivering the verdict. Multiple sclerosis. Progressive, likely irreversible. It explains the tremors, the weakness, the coordination loss, the doctor said. There's no cure, but with proper management. I stopped listening after that. The diagnosis didn't feel earned. The tests had been superficial. No MRIs, no spinal taps, just reflex checks and guesswork. Still, I nodded. What else could I do? Ryan drove me home. Vanessa was waiting. "Well?" she asked. "MS," Ryan replied, almost too quickly. "He'll need daily care, strict routines, and medication." Vanessa smiled gently, but her eyes didn't. "Don't worry, Edward. We'll help you through this." From that day forward, they came every morning with a pill organizer. "Take this after breakfast," Vanessa would say. "It'll help with the tremors." And I did. At first, Helen was the first to notice something was off. "This doesn't make sense," she whispered one night as she helped me to bed. "You were sharp as ever 3 months ago. You walked 3 miles a day. Now you can't hold a fork?" I looked at her, my tongue numb, my legs heavy. She leaned in close. "They're giving you something," I don't know what, but every time they show up, you get worse. I blinked at her. I wanted to believe she was wrong. I really did. But deep down, I knew she wasn't. The next morning, Helen gave me my usual pills, except they looked different. "These are the same, don't worry," she said with a wink. "Just changed the brand." I trusted her. I took the new pills, and something strange happened. Nothing. No dizziness, no slurred speech, no tremors. I didn't get worse. And over the next week, I got better. Slowly, steadily, the weight in my limbs lifted. The fog in my mind cleared. That's when I understood. I wasn't sick. I was being made sick. They were poisoning me. I told Helen everything, or rather, I nodded when she guessed it aloud. She cried. Then we made a pact. I would keep taking the placebo pills she gave me, continue to recover, regain strength, but pretend I was still declining. Meanwhile, Ryan and Vanessa would believe their plan was working. "They're after the house, your stocks, the trust fund," Helen said. "Vanessa was talking about retirement homes last week." "Let them," I whispered. "Let them think they've won." And so the act began. Every morning I swallowed fake pills. Every afternoon I slumped in my chair, drooling slightly, staring at the floor as if my mind had vacated. They thought I was dying slowly. I was watching, listening, remembering. I spent weeks pretending to deteriorate. Ryan began visiting more often, but never alone. He always brought papers, documents, and excuses. "Dad, you should sign power of attorney. It'll help us handle your medical bills more easily." Vanessa chimed in. "We'll take care of everything. You just rest." I scribbled a shaky signature. Helen was furious. "Are you sure you want to sign that?" I smiled faintly. "You gave me back control of my body. Let me handle the rest." She nodded, reluctantly. Ryan took the document, thinking I had finally surrendered. He had no idea that before he arrived that morning, I'd already called my lawyer, an old friend named Malcolm Hayes, and given him new instructions. Helen continued swapping the pills daily. Meanwhile, I got stronger. Each night, when they were gone, I walked slowly across the room, then did stretches in secret. Within 3 weeks, I could climb stairs again. But when Ryan was around, I stayed limp, drooling, slouched. Vanessa started talking openly on the phone in my presence. "Yes, the property alone is worth at least $1.2 million, and if we sell the condo he's renting out, that's another $800K. She thought I was deaf, or too far gone to understand numbers. She was wrong. One morning, Helen walked in holding a yellow envelope. "They filed for full guardianship," she said. "Court hearings in 2 weeks. They want legal control over everything." I nodded. "Let them." "But Edward, trust me." We spent the next days preparing. Malcolm gathered medical reports, bank statements, and surveillance footage. Footage? Yes. 2 months earlier, Helen had installed a camera in the kitchen for safety. But it had picked up more than spilled milk. It captured Ryan dropping pills into a teacup. It recorded Vanessa saying, "Don't give him too much at once. If he dies suddenly, it'll look suspicious." That was enough. The day of the hearing arrived. Ryan and Vanessa were dressed in black and gray. Respectable, calm, practiced. I was wheeled into the courtroom by Helen. I slouched in the chair. Blank eyes, mouth slightly open. The judge, Honorable Linda Markson, looked down from the bench. Mr. Langston has been diagnosed with progressive MS. His children claim he is no longer able to manage his affairs. They are seeking full guardianship. Ryan stood confidently. Your Honor, my father is clearly declining. We've tried to help, but he needs around-the-clock care. Vanessa nodded, placing a rehearsed hand over her heart. This isn't about money. It's about protecting him. The judge looked at me. Mr. Langston, do you wish to speak? Helen leaned over and whispered, Now? I blinked twice. Then slowly, I rose to my feet. Gasps echoed. The bailiff stepped forward, stunned. Ryan paled. Vanessa's jaw dropped. I took a step forward, then another. No cane, no assistance, no tremble, just clarity. I do wish to speak, Your Honor, I said clearly. You could hear a pin drop. I turned toward the judge. I am not sick. I never was. The symptoms were drug-induced, administered by my son and his wife, who manipulated a false diagnosis. Malcolm stood. Your Honor, we have video evidence, recorded audio, and a sworn affidavit from a pharmacist confirming the contents of the pills were not consistent with any MS treatment. Ryan stammered, This is a trick. He's lying. I turned to him. Tell me, Ryan, was it a trick when you told Vanessa not to overdose me in case the coroner got suspicious? He fell silent. After court, everything changed. Ryan and Vanessa were indicted for attempted elder abuse and fraud. The case made local news. Malcolm handled the legal fallout while Helen and I returned home. I revoked the power of attorney, sold several properties, and transferred my assets. Not to a blood relative, but to someone who actually saved my life. Helen, I said one evening as we watched Elliot read in the corner, you've never asked me for anything. That's exactly why you deserve everything. She shook her head. I don't need... But you do, I interrupted. And more importantly, Elliot does. He deserves every opportunity my son tried to steal from me. I updated my will. Everything, home, investments, stocks, savings, would go to Helen Archer and her son Elliot. Not out of revenge, but out of recognition. Helen never boasted. She didn't buy a sports car. She didn't move into a mansion. She used part of the inheritance to fix the leaking roof, pay off debts, and open a college fund for Elliot. She hired a math tutor. She let him enroll in science camps. He smiled more, laughed more, grew more. And I went back to planting tomatoes. Occasionally I'd get a letter from some old friend asking if I was really still alive. I'd chuckle and toss it aside. I didn't need recognition. I had something far better. Months later, Ryan came to the gate. I watched from the porch as he stood outside like a stranger. He didn't call out. He didn't knock. He just stood. Then turned and walked away. I didn't stop him. He had already left the day he gave me poison instead of love. Years passed. Elliot graduated with honors, then medical school, then residency. At his white coat ceremony, he walked across the stage, looked into the crowd, and nodded. To me. I nodded back. No one else knew who I was, and I preferred it that way. Because I didn't need the world to remember me. I only needed one person to carry the truth. People talk a lot about justice, but justice isn't always loud. Sometimes it walks into a courtroom, on legs no one thought could stand. They tried to paralyze me, I let them think they had. And in that silence I wrote a new legacy, not with anger, but with clarity and love. My name is Edward Langston, and I am no one's victim. After the court ruling, the house was quiet again. No more hushed arguments behind the guest room door. No more fake smiles. No more bitter tea. Helen began opening the windows each morning, letting sunlight fall on the wooden floors. Elliot filled the rooms with laughter and Lego bricks. It didn't feel like a grand estate anymore. It felt like a home. I gave Helen full access to everything. Not just the accounts or deeds, but passwords, keys, names of people I trusted. She hesitated at first. "You really mean it?" she asked. "I've never meant anything more in my life," I said. And I had. Malcolm, ever efficient, began liquidating the unnecessary properties. The yacht I never used, the apartment in Atlanta, the land that had sat idle for decades. He created a foundation under my name, but not for vanity. It was built to fund young caregivers who had no formal education but hearts made of steel. People like Helen. People like Martha, my late wife, had once been. It offered training, certification, and scholarships. Helen volunteered at the foundation office on weekends. "I want them to know what dignity looks like," she said. She didn't need to say more. I watched Elliot grow with awe. That boy, once quiet and cautious, began leading classroom discussions, building projects from scratch, and dreaming without apology. He once asked me, "Do you think I can really become a doctor?" I looked him in the eyes and replied, "You already are one, Elliot. You just haven't started treating patients yet." He beamed. Helen cried in the hallway that night. "You're giving him what I never could," she whispered. "No," I corrected gently. "You gave him what no one else could. I'm just helping carry the weight." News of the trial never made national headlines, but locally, it became a whisper people couldn't ignore. Some called me dramatic. Others called me a hero. I didn't care for either. But something interesting happened. Letters began arriving, from strangers. "My daughter hasn't spoken to me in 5 years. They moved me into a facility and took my name off the will. You gave me courage, Mr. Langston." Helen started responding to some. Elliot set up a website to collect stories. Before we knew it, the Langston line became a network, a quiet revolution of dignity reclaimers. I smiled at the thought. I had become a founder in my final chapter. I never saw Vanessa again. Rumor had it. She filed for divorce the moment Ryan's assets were frozen. She drained what she could and vanished to Florida. Helen once asked, "Do you feel any satisfaction knowing how it ended for her?" I thought carefully. No, because she never started from a place of love. She simply returned to it. One morning, a plain white envelope arrived with no return address. I knew the handwriting immediately. Ryan. Inside was a single page. "Dad, I've spent the last year trying to understand how we got here. I remember you teaching me how to tie my shoes. I remember you sitting outside my room when I had nightmares. I remember a father who would have died for me. And I betrayed that man. I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know. I think about what I did every day. I'm sorry. Ryan." I folded the paper gently and tucked it into the old watch box Martha once gave me. Helen asked if I would respond. "No," I said. "Some words are enough on their own, but I'll remember them." At Elliot's high school graduation, he gave the class speech. Success, he said, is not what you inherit. It's what you carry. He looked at me then, not as a patient, not as a victim, but as a man who taught him to walk upright, even when the world tried to keep him down. He later showed me his acceptance letter, Harvard Medical School. My hands trembled for the first time in months, but not from illness, from joy. Helen and I began gardening again. Tomatoes, basil, zucchini, just like Martha and I once had. Some evenings I'd sit on the porch while she read a book beside me. The wind would brush through the trees, and I'd think to myself, "You almost let them bury you, Edward, but you grew roots instead." I was no longer waiting to die. I was helping something grow. Years passed. I aged, this time for real. One spring afternoon, I called Helen and Elliot to the living room. "I want to record a message," I said. They helped me sit, turned on the camera, and waited. I cleared my throat and began. "If you're watching this, it means I've gone. But I didn't leave in pain. I left in peace. I was betrayed, but I wasn't broken. I was drugged, but I didn't stay numb. I walked back into the world they tried to remove me from, and I did it with the help of two people who expected nothing. I leave behind more than wealth. I leave behind proof that character is not inherited. It is chosen." Helen cried softly. Elliot held my hand. After I passed, there was no grand funeral, just a small gathering in the garden, as I had requested. Helen and Elliot stood side by side, greeting neighbors. Malcolm handled the details. Ryan didn't show up. But a week later, he did show up to the lawyer's office. He came dressed in black, with a forced, solemn expression and a new suit. The room was quiet. Helen sat calmly, Elliot beside her. Malcolm entered, holding a thick envelope. "We're here to read the final will and testimony of Mr. Edward Langston," he said, his voice firm. "Let's begin." He pressed play on a screen. My face appeared, older but clear-eyed. "If you're watching this, I'm gone. But if Ryan is in the room, it means he showed up, not when I needed him, but when he thought there was something to gain." Ryan flinched. "You tried to silence me. You drugged me. And worst of all, you didn't regret it until it cost you something. I gave you life and you tried to trade mine for comfort. You inherit nothing." A beat of silence. To Helen Archer, who gave without asking, who believed when no one else did, I leave everything. And to Elliot Archer, who walked into my life as a boy and became the man I would have proudly called my grandson, I leave my name, my foundation, and my legacy. Ryan stood up abruptly. "This is manipulation. You can't be serious." Malcolm didn't blink. "The document is witnessed, notarized, and already filed. You're welcome to challenge it, Mr. Langston, but I'd advise against it." Ryan's hands curled into fists. Elliot turned to him, calm but steady. "We owe you nothing." Ryan left without another word. That was the last time anyone saw him. Years passed. Elliot became a doctor, not the kind who took shortcuts or chased prestige, the kind who sat with patients long after visiting hours ended. He opened free clinics, sponsored medical camps, built a mentoring program for kids without fathers. He started something called the Langston Initiative, a scholarship fund for children whose caregivers worked in silence, like Helen once had. People asked him if Edward Langston was his grandfather. He always smiled. "Not by blood," he'd say, "but by choice." Inside the foundation's main office, there's a small framed photo on the wall. An old man in a sweater, standing beside a boy holding a telescope. Below it, a plaque reads, "He taught me that walking again isn't about steps. It's about standing for something." Visitors pause at that photo. They don't know the full story, but they feel it. People talk about revenge, about teaching lessons, about justice. But sometimes, the most powerful justice is not punishing the wrong person. It's rewarding the right one. They tried to make me a prisoner in my own body. I let them think they had. And in that silence, I rose. Not with anger, but with love, clarity, and choice. I didn't just get my life back, I gave it forward.